Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel, co-host of Escape from the City on the ABC, and partner of Empower Wealth Advisory. Ben Kingsley, chair of Property Investors Council of Australia and the founder of Empower Wealth Advisory, named the 2018 and 2019 Property Advisory Firm of the Year. Stay tuned as they bring you the insider's guide to property, finance and money management.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Property Couch. Welcome back to you, Ben.
G'day, mate. How are we?
Very good, mate. Very good. How's your week been?
Good. Oh, it's always good. It's a big week in data, Bryce. Big week in data. But so you know, we're proposing a new segment, Bryce.
We are proposing a new segment.
We're going to sort of, the Did You Knows are going to, we'll just put it into a dormant status. So, you know, like the economy, you know, we need to put it into a dormant state.
You're going to sunset it.
We're just going to have a little rest with Did You Knows, and we're going to introduce a new segment, Bryce. The headlines, the headline news in the
what's making property news, Ben? Even I know that segment.
There we go. What's making property news? Sounds great. So you'll have to hang around for that.
Yeah, exactly, towards the end. But hey, we haven't had any footy banter for a little while, Ben, largely because there's no footy. Yeah. But it's good to see there's a few rumblings going on across the country in terms of trying to get some form of organised sport back into the landscape. So that'll be nice for people to at least in Victoria now this weekend we can hang out with 5 of our mates and up to groups of 10, which is a nice little change. Have you have you locked in a catch up?
Well, apparently a couple of the boys, Jack and Harry's friends, came over yesterday, so they didn't waste any time in terms of having some friends over. No, I haven't locked in anything yet, mate. I think about the weekend at about 4 o'clock on Friday. So nothing planned. How about you? Anything exciting?
Yeah. Well, we got some friends. When you live in a holiday destination, Ben, everyone's keen to come down the highway when they can break out of a bit of COVID-19, lock it down. But our eldest turns 9 tomorrow, so
happy
he's
birthday.
Particularly excited that he's got 3 of his mates coming over, and interesting, just to give you signs of COVID-19. He goes, "Dad, would it be all right with all my mates come over if they just all bring their iPads and we just hang around playing iPads?" It's like, mate, no.
Happy birthday, Jack. Happy birthday.
We're going to introduce this post-COVID thing called let's just interact with our friends face-to-face rather than doing it over Zoom. So very good. Hey, we've got a bit to cover today, which is fun. We've got a Q&A day.
Yes.
We always love Q&A day, but a couple of things before we get there, Ben.
Yep.
You and I have been reading out on Facebook the chapter highlights from our book. So we wrote it 5 years ago, back in 2015. It was published in 2016. Here we are in 2020. So what we're actually doing is on Facebook going through chapter by chapter, week by week, not sort of audio book style, Ben, where we're reading word for word. We're actually just pulling out the key concepts and then talking about them and as they relate to now and as they related at the time back in 2015. So what I want to do is encourage our community, if you're not on our Facebook page, just to go over there, like the page, Ben, and keep an eye on that because they go from anywhere between 10 to 20 minutes. And we're doing some concepts there.
That's right, Bryce, because me reading that book, mate, would be like sticking pins in people's eyes. So that's why we don't do that.
But it's funny you say that, Ben, because yesterday I locked myself into the studio and I did 6 hours because we are actually reading our book.
No. You are reading our book. There's a reason for that.
I was being generous. Andrea says to me last night, she goes, "Well, how come you're reading it and not Ben?" I said, "Well, just put it this way, Ben is brilliant at a lot of things. Reading out aloud is probably not in his top 3.
Not his strength, not his go-to."
So I'm reading the audio book, Ben. So I'm looking forward to for those folks who like to listen rather than read. That'll be coming out soon. And Ben, we also worked on a course which we're going to launch on the 1st of June, which I'm super excited about. And so basically, we are distilling pretty much our 20 plus years into this online course that we've called Start and Build. So for those people who want to start a portfolio or those people who already have and they want to continue to build, it covers everyone. But essentially there's 3 modules, 18 lessons, Ben. And so we're going to launch that into the community. And what I'm really proud of, Ben, is quite often there's people in our industry who charge $10,000 plus for this type of information. And I can tell you, Ben, that we are not even within a bull's roar of that price. It is going to be affordable for absolutely everyone, and that is part of our mantra, so that really good quality information is available at an affordable price. So
yeah, if you want to be guided by you and I, this is the best way to do it without actually having the real thing.
Exactly, Ben. So there is some people who, as I've said it before, there's the do-it-yourself crowd, there's the do-it-with-you crowd, and there's the do-it-for-you crowd. And if you're the do-it-with-you crowd, this will be right up your alley, because we can sit there alongside you and walk you through it. Now, what I'm doing, Ben, in the lead up to that is we've got reviews on iTunes. We've been lucky enough to get some really great feedback from our community with the 5-star reviews. Now, we put a shout out to people recently. If they want to give us, if they've been in our community for some time and they want to give us a review, we'd be happy to get that, Ben. It was fully open. If you want to give us 1 star, that's fine. Our preference is 4 or 5, but this one caught my eye, Ben. This one was from Nick Wilkinson, and it says, "To Stig and the gang." Right, so just so it's clear where you and I are in the pecking order. To Stig and the gang. Can't talk more highly about the podcast. I think I binge listened to the first 160 podcasts in about 2 and a bit months. Yes, That's a lot of hours. I recommend this podcast to anyone who's got a limited knowledge of property investing that wants to learn the fundamentals and have them ingrained in your head. I'm currently looking for a property using all of the information I've stored from the gang, and recommend this to all my friends. Look forward to hopefully hearing more of the Stig. Yeah, one day that'll be nice, wouldn't it? So thanks for reaching out with that review. We are going to reach out to Ivis and Emma via info@theproperty couch. We will give you access to that course.
Wow, free course. So you can't just give us 5 stars. You've actually got to write something, don't you? Because we won't know who you are.
Yeah,
that's probably the point here. So
the point is you can put as many stars as you like, Ben. Like I said, 1 to 5. But if you want it read out, just have an interesting angle, I reckon. That might.
And if you get it read out, you get access to the course. That's for free. Well, that's pretty cool.
So maybe our friend who we read out his review in the past, Ben, where we might have got him in trouble with his partner, given that we're talking about DT and all that. Maybe if he wants to write in, we'll give him access too, just to say sorry for getting him into trouble. All right, so
Q&A day.
Before we go into that, one last bit of housekeeping is the survey.
Yes.
Pick a survey. You want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I do. So we have that's being launched today, and we've got an exclusive on the Property Couch. So it's I think there's about 12 questions, right? Real simple 2-minute survey that we want to get a read on the psychology and the sentiment and what the intentions are and the impact has been from in the property market for property investors. So it's a really simple survey to do. We want it to be a snapshot of this moment in time in terms of what the plans are, intentions are. So we are going to put it in the show notes. We are also going to, if you're a Picker member, you will be getting an email today with the link to the SurveyMonkey link. We are going to talk to all of our property friends around the country to basically get this, because we are going to share the report to everyone so people can actually see what's going on, Bryce, because what's been happening is still, I still remain very calm and calculated in terms of what's happening in the property space. But, we saw again the media grab the worst case scenario. It reminded me of, I'm pretty sure it was the Sydney Morning Herald headline that says 150,000 people to die from COVID-19 in Australia, right?
Wow.
So the journalists will always need to quote a source. And so we had the same sort of thing in the last 24 hours with CBA, who are, like the biggest lender in the country, some very smart people in that building, have put their best case scenario down for the shareholders to understand and the potential worst case scenario. So the best case scenario showed us around an 11% decline in property prices with their finger in the air, their best guess. But their worst case scenario, Bryce, was 32% up until the end of 2022, where effectively we just do not recover. Unemployment stays above 10%. and we go into what would be considered a very, very deep recession, and that's their worst case scenario. But how did you think the news industry led with that? What do you think they said? 11%.
I think they would have gone with the best case scenario. Surely, Ben. I want to believe in the best.
Most probable case. You would have thought, Bryce, they would have said most probable case. No. Property prices to drop by a third. So I have
maybe they should get Harry Dent from the US to come over here. He's always good for a headline.
Oh well, we've got
his stock standard is 40%.
We've got Martin North with his predictions, because Steve Keen has since left the country after his 40% declines. He had 3 goes at it and never got it right, so he's now at a university in London. But look, the reality is everyone's looking at their data in their way, and so I'm looking also at the data, and I'll be talking a little bit about the data later in the show, and we'll have Jeremy on later in the show as well.
Which will be exciting. He's got some good data. Now let's remind our listeners, Ben, who've been with us for a long time, even those who've just joined us recently, about first principles. Mm-hmm. First principles around, if someone goes with a headline that the property market is going to drop 32%, let's remember first principle number 1. Australia is not one big market. Mm-hmm. So what are they talking about? It's going to drop 32%. Which bit? Is it a specific bit? Is it an average? Is it the whole lot? Will there be certain parts of the market that actually do better whilst certain parts of the market do worse? Will there be some that are actually average in the middle? So I think we need to remember first principles around headlines are there to get your eyeballs, but clearly we are not in one big market. We've said that pretty much from the first 10 episodes, Ben, of this podcast, and here we are in approaching 300 episodes, and we're saying exactly the same thing.
Well, look, and for me, there's also a little bit of duty of care here, Bryce. I know that a journalist has a job to, get their stories up and make an impact, and they are quoting a reliable source, in this case being the Commonwealth Bank of Australia. But it's also dangerous in terms of, and I use the example of the President of the United States of America when he came out a couple of weeks ago and talked about disinfectant. Maybe if we injected disinfectant or drank disinfectant, then we might be able to kill the virus. Now, of course, that put the whole country into a panic mode, and all the producers of Dettol and all that coming out saying, please do not, this is very dangerous, it may kill you. Under no circumstances should you do such a thing. So you've got to understand that these people in a position of influence and authority and so forth, that what they say matters. And so if I was listening to the news last night and I heard, 95% of the story being around a 32% fall in property prices, that may put me into a position where I actually act on that, okay? And I want to get in before property prices get to that type of level. Now, I've said all along, the economy is only a reflection of the actions of the people within it. If we all believe that story, our behaviour will make that story come true, if we believe in that. Now, what's brilliant about human species, Bryce, and what I've noticed over my journey of wealth creation and personal development and mindset is that love always wins, but also so does optimistic attitudes. Optimism always beats pessimism. Mm-hmm. And you hear Warren Buffett talk about this confidently when he talks about the share market is a voting machine. Mm-hmm. Okay, and so when there's pessimism, the votes are going down, and you can see it. So it acts like a voting machine. But the fundamentals are still that the optimists seem to always win. And if you have an optimistic outlook, Bryce, you're usually better off financially. Now, there is a correlation between having optimism, having a go, having a shot at it, and winning. All right, there is a strong correlation with that. So the pessimists who are out there who think that this is a doomsday and all of that, there's a market for them, because there's a group of people who are glass half empty, and that works for them, and they get behind that story and they build a bias around that. But what's really, really pleasing is the fundamental belief of the quiet Australians is we're fundamentally optimistic about the world. And even though I'll be talking about the sentiment results from Westpac and at the Melbourne Institute here at the end of the show. But fundamentally, we are more optimistic than we are pessimistic for more often than not. And that's how an economy operates. We've talked about the wealth effect before, when we're feeling good about things, we get out there and spend and we do things. So we need the mainstream media to report balanced, to not sensationalise this, because they could create this. They could create a property run. And I'm saying it's still unlikely because the data's not suggesting it, and the smart money is still showing that there's activity in the marketplace, and I expect that to improve. But like anything, you do run multiple scenarios, and that's what CBA did. And their worst case scenario, as opposed to their more, what do they call it? I want to get the wording right. Their preferred and also their most probable scenario was property prices falling around 11% on the back of the economy opening up.
Well, the facts are, Ben, on the ground, our team is buying properties, particularly in Queensland, as if there's been no COVID, Ben. There's multiple offers, many people on the properties that we're typically buying. So the one way to look at this is, I think that there's no panic selling. The banking system has helped underpin that because they're giving repayment holidays to those who are the most vulnerable. So clearly you need to have a run of stock that continues to come on where supply exceeds demand. That doesn't happen. At some point in the future, when that safety net no longer happens, there may be segments of the market that actually is impacted by that, and so we certainly get that, and those markets will be vulnerable. But typically the suburbs that we are buying in, Ben, the best way to think about it is they have a range of people at different life cycles. So if you think about the investment grade suburbs, you may have someone who's owned that property and lived in that property for 30 years, Ben, and they have zero debt, versus someone who's been in it for 10 years and has, say, 50% of the debt, and then someone who's just straight in the market and they've got 105% of the debt, for example. So you've got this real cross-section of people, and you've got high demand and limited supply. So it means that if someone within that segment is actually vulnerable, i.e. the person who's come in late and is got a higher mortgage level, the chances are that person may fall out of the market, Ben, but someone else is willing to take their place. And as a whole, the whole suburb and the whole region is not at the same life cycle, so they're not all jumping out. But if you go out to the greenfield estates, for example, Ben, people are typically in a similar life cycle. They're getting their foot on the ladder. They're just establishing their family. And I'm generalising to a certain extent, but I'm just trying to paint a framework and a picture here. Yeah. That if that particular market, something was particularly happening to that segment of the market, it's happening to them all at the same stage of their life cycle. Therefore, en masse, that can affect those people in those markets. So again, first principles, but also helping people look under the bonnet, that when people are making statements around markets crashing or markets really severely correcting, I mean, in some of the markets that we buy in, Ben, that are investment grade, that have that profile that I've just described to you, in the height of the pandemic anxiety, we were actually buying properties that were 10% off, that were 12% off, right? So people who were willing to, jobs in place, buffers in place, all of the stock standard principles we talk about, they were actually able to take up the opportunity by, in particular, we bought a property that was almost 1,000 square metres for under 450, that was closer to 500 prior to that, where there was zero interest, because it was probably the peak of the anxiety, Ben. Yep. The real estate agent was in the peak of the headspace of anxiety. So we've got it, and now looking back, that vendor's probably going, oh, gee whiz, if I had just waited a few more weeks, I probably would have got a better outcome. So some of that price movement has already happened. People were able to pick stuff up, but it doesn't mean no one in that market is going to crystallise that drop unless they actually sell, which they're not. And now, if you talk to our buyers team, that's probably come back to equilibrium and then pushing into a competitive scenario again.
I think you summarise it nicely there, Bryson. I'll finish off by just the other thesis for the doomsday is that that the banks will not continue their repayment holidays. And again, Matt Common on the interviews that I heard last night and what I've read clearly stated that there's no appetite to turn off those types of safety nets and push the can down the road a little bit further for that bridge to take shape, and then obviously the economy to move back. Like every week, every month, we are getting better at treatments and closer to vaccination requirements and those types of things. But every week we're opening up a little bit more. Now, the probability is always still going to be that we will see an increase in the number of cases because we're not in lockdown, right? But in terms of manageable cases and getting that balance right, we are, a month ahead of where we were, and with that month we get that walk a mile, see a mile knowledge that comes with that. So I think the thesis that they have for worst case scenario around that the repayment pause will not be reinstated for some, I suspect that will be wrong. I suspect that the banks will continue to look after those who have, and they'll be having dialogue on a case-by-case basis with that household. Because what we don't want is households who do kick the can down the road when they don't need to, right? When they've got enough in the tank and they've got some income coming in. We don't necessarily need to have those repayment pauses going on. But there will still be some people who will need that repayment pause. And for that household, they're going to have to make a decision around the cost might be an extra $6,000 for them to have that repayment extended, or $8,000 or $10,000. Now, the judgment call on that is, will property prices in the next 3 to 5 years accommodate that to allow them to say that was a good decision, or will property prices not accommodate that? And that will come down to, yes, the longer we stay in this, if we stay in unemployment for a 2 to 3 year period at that sort of 8, 9 or 10% level, it will impact property prices over that period of time. There is no doubt that we will see double-digit property price falls, but that is not the consensus of most people. Shane Oliver last night also said, based on the data that he's seen, that he's thinking around 10%. Westpac, based on their data, is thinking around 10%. So I think the consensus is around that sort of level based on the data we're seeing. Now, we've obviously got some important data which we'll be sharing later in the show. But that's my message to people. It's like, try and get context, try and get an understanding. Yeah, if everyone decided to sell their property tomorrow at any price, if everyone decided, if none of us went back to work, if none of us went back to normal spending behaviours and all of that, then we will have a slower recovery, and that will have an impact on property prices. There's no doubt about that. But the more common view and what the data is suggesting is that we will recover through this period, and then we will see, it won't be a full recovery. We won't be back up to full tilt like we were in February. But we will see a clear improvement, and to maybe 80% of where we were. And then it's that last mile to get to back to full economy. That's the bit that's going to take a little bit of time. But again, our data also suggests, and we go back to the data, that if unemployment rates are falling but are around that 7.5%, property prices grow. When unemployment is coming back down, property prices grow, because it also feeds into sentiment and confidence and the like. So we're going to see a horror number in terms of unemployment for the next couple of months. But as that starts to pick up and it's going back down towards the 6% that we expect for next year, that will breed confidence into people around job stability and a confidence in low interest rates. So that's where we'll see the uplift.
You talked about returning back, where we were in the February levels, Ben. Let's be honest with the property market, it was returning to levels that were unsustainable in terms of if we only have to rewind 2 years ago when APRA dropped a handbrake to try and take some of that heat out of it. So the silver lining for the property market is that if it returns back to 80% of capacity anyway, that's actually a more sustainable market than what it was looking like leading into this anyway. So, hey, that's probably one of the longer intros we've had, Ben, because I'm going to fly into my Mindset Minute team here quickly.
Sure.
The American author and poet Anne Lamott on the benefits of rest. Almost everything will work again if you unplug it for a few minutes, including you. So I wonder how many people, because there's two camps obviously through this pandemic, Ben. There's those that have been really, really affected and their stress levels have been higher, and so they're going through a process now. And then there's the other group that have gone, well, okay, I've still had my job. A few things have changed for me, but ultimately I've had a chance to slow down. and actually appreciate life. I was talking to my sister yesterday, I was talking to some friends, and they've gone, it's actually just been really nice to take a breather. And so I think that that's why I thought this quote here, Ben, around almost everything will work again if you unplug it for a few minutes, including our planet. Let's be honest, there's probably less fossil fuels being burnt and less fuel going up into the air, and who knows, maybe even the ozone layer's closed back over, Ben. But I know for some people it's been a world of pain during this time, and our hearts go out to them. But for the other side of the equation, for folks that have been able to navigate it with their job and everything's okay, I think the breather might have actually been, for a lot of people, a really welcome relief. And hopefully for you, if you're listening to this and that's been something for you, maybe you've discovered going for a bike ride with your family. I'm doing jigsaws with the boys, Ben. I'm doing lots of things that probably wouldn't have done prior to this. So it's been a nice reflection point in the midst of a time that hasn't been that great for us globally. So there you go. Let's go into
I like that. I like that, Bryce. I think a pause and a calmness and a reset, it feels good. I agree. I've been able to, in my downtime, I've cleaned the shed up. I've redone my study. I've been productive because there's been no footy on.
I've got to say, mate, the jobs around the house have all much pretty much done, haven't they? Which is
I have painted the fence. Yep, all of the above.
Hey, I mentioned before, folks, that we are doing the Facebook Live. So we've had a few questions. So we thought that we've collated a lot of the questions that we've been receiving in the last 7 to 10 days, Ben, just to try and keep them as timely as possible, to get a bit of an idea of what are the questions that are people having right now, so that we can answer the questions that people have got on their mind. So the first one, Ben, is from Sabrina. Good evening. I listen to your podcast. I don't get a chance to listen to every single one, but I love you guys and try to listen whenever I can. I need your advice, please. My situation is I have some buffer saving in my offset account, around $25,000, and me and my husband both still have jobs in this situation. But I am working less hours because I'm not sending my son to childcare. The monthly earnings will keep us going, but very tight, and I don't know when I can send my son to childcare again. So my question is, am I eligible to withdraw $10,000 superannuation? Because my hours have been reduced significantly, in brackets, my company has given me enough hours, but I've elected not to work life before because of my son, close brackets. So can I apply for super? And what is the pros and cons if I withdraw my super? Am I just, I am just, now I gave you a little heckle before, Ben. And
see, that's what happens.
You've got to eat some humble pie. And I'm just scared if it will run out of money and if I didn't apply for it. Please help if possible, Sabrina.
Okay. So, Sabrina, we can't give direct advice to you in regards to those circumstances. So that's something that we've just got to be mindful of, and we're not qualified to give super advice. So we can only talk about statements of fact, and this is for general information for everyone. So we understand the rules, and we expect you to go to the website to get this information from the government. But we understand that if you have suffered a downturn in hours worked of greater than 20%. So if you're a full-time worker, we refer to that as 0.8. So if you're working 80%, so you've had a fall of 20% of your work hours, that would be one of the eligibility criteria. If you're self-employed, you need to demonstrate an income reduction of at least 20% is what we understand to all that be the case. Now, I say to people, anyone for that matter, that your super is your money, number one. It is your money, and you do have, in your case, there's a buffer there of $25,000. Now, again, I don't know how quickly your cash burn is, because that's always the point here. It's the cash burn and feeling comfortable. And a lot of people have sought to grab their super, and the people that we've been talking to in our business have a fairly substantial buffer in terms of some other households who might be going from paycheck to paycheck or mortgage repayment to mortgage repayment. Most of the people we're talking to have in excess of $10,000 in their account. Now, so the question then is, what is the impact of that? Well, ultimately, if you take that money out and you park it in your offset account, it's potentially earning you interest, and that may be a consideration. But you're not if you've got it invested, there's also the potential for greater compounding interest of that money over time. So I say to people, go carefully into the idea of accessing your money, and speak to a professional in terms of getting some cash flow modelling done. Now, that professional should be a financial planner, or even your accountant should be able to give you some indication in regards to changes in your circumstances and how long your money will be lasting. Now, we are aware of this, and we are building a model software to potentially help with this. So stay tuned. It is a few months away. We're very busy in our development part of our business at the moment in terms of developing our new technology. But stay tuned, because that we are going to do a thing called Money Stretch. And what Money Stretch is going to be is, when you put all your data in there, it's going to tell you exactly how long your money will last you once you start playing around with impacts on income. So stay tuned for that. We've briefed it all up. We've just got to find enough dev time to actually get it built because we have a lot of projects going on in terms of modelling simulations and so forth.
Well, it's a good point you make there, Ben, because we've got over 20,000 people using that that software now.
Our My Wealth portal, free platform for everyone to use. Yes.
And I guess the point to our community is, if you're not part of that, you can, because essentially it's free. You can go in as an alias, but what it's doing is allowing you to have a better handle on both essential and discretionary spending, have a better handle on, because our mission is for you to trap surplus. Like, ultimately, correct, the whole point of the podcast is to show you how to trap surplus, because then you've got a choice. You go down the path of, will I trap my surplus on invested in lifestyle, or will I invest it in assets, or somewhere in between, right? So that's the whole point. So there's a platform that allows you to do that, but it also means that we are continually looking for ways to find value propositions that help people better manage their money. So we've got Money Fit, we've got Money Stretch in the queue, right? Ultimately, there's Money Smarts. And then collectively, we talk about budgets alone not working, right? So it allows you to have a better understanding of both your balance sheet and your profit and loss within your own house, but also allow you to make some decisions around future expenditure that you have, because that's really important. That's why we say budgets don't work, because budgets are realistically saying, well, let's have a look in the rear vision mirror. Whereas if you can actually have a look at what expenditure is likely to come up, not only this year, but in your life cycle. You and I got young boys, so they're going to go to high school. Where do we send them? We want to renovate. Well, you don't anymore, because you've just already done that, but you want to upgrade your car at some point. So this is a central place for people to park their information anonymously if they want to, but ultimately access all of these tools that we will continue to roll out, Ben, for the community, and we're doing it for free. We want to help people better manage their money. So we'll put the link in the show notes as well. Hey, I just wanted to say on your response to the question about super, it really is a compounding question, isn't it? Because ultimately, if it seems like there was a comfort factor. You talked about the cash burn. We don't know what that is, but the comfort factor around having an extra 10,000, maybe 20,000, depending on their circumstances, versus having that in a compounding scenario that will leverage over time for their retirement. The lost opportunity cost of that money being in your super really is what she asked for pros and cons. The cons are that you will rob a bit of tomorrow to provide that comfort for today. So if the $25,000 is enough to cover your cash burn, that's one thing, versus if you actually need it to keep food on the table, that's a different thing.
Nice one.
All right, let's go on to the next one. Hopefully that helps. Sabrina, let us know. The next one is from Danielle Seddon. This is a question that went straight through to my own personal website here, Ben. Hi, Bryce. I've just started reading your book. I bought last year, The Armchair Guide to Property Investing. I find it quite interesting, and a few similar matters are brought up, like in The Barefoot Investor. I've read a few times not to have your loans with one bank. So my first question is, how do you use your equity you have with that bank to purchase another investment and get the loan with another bank? I can't seem to find much information about it and do not understand it, but my partner has tried to do it and his broker seemed to think it was too hard, but reading it can be done. Well, there's a flag there if the broker says that, Ben. We have 6 properties between us. I have 2 and Brendan, my partner, has 4. We want to invest more, and my aim was a property every 2 years until we reach the time we want a new house for ourselves to live in the country or a shack. My second question, I've read a lot about don't cross-collateralise your loans. I felt like I did this, and I don't see how you don't do it if you're using your property as security and the equity in it. Then yesterday I read an article and it says if you have standalone loans for each property that isn't cross-collateralised, it's only when you have all your properties and loans as one. Is this correct? My third question, Ben, is my partner is about to pay off his house and own it. the one we currently reside in. He wants to know if he pays it off, does he get the deed to his house or not, because he has used it as security with his other 3 investments. Any help and advice you could give would be greatly appreciated. Thank you, Danielle. Okay, let's cover number 1, Ben.
Sure.
The first one was around the broker saying it was too hard to get equity from another bank to purchase an investment property. Now, we have covered this before, Ben, but it is a first principle question. It comes up a lot, so it was worth repeating so that we can get this done. So you're the mortgage broker that Chris Bryan referred to, so you're probably the best qualified at this point to kick off the conversation.
Sure. Obviously, without being able to draw anything for our listeners, just think of it like this. There's 2 functions in which lending plays. The first function is the purpose of that money. So the purpose of that money could be to buy or pay a deposit for a new investment property. So if we've got equity in an existing property, we can release that equity for the purpose of investment, and that would become an investment loan. The second piece of the puzzle is what we call the security or the collateral, in which the bank is taking, of which they're lending the money against. And because it's residential property, that's why they lend it at such a cheap rate. And then, the car rates are a little bit higher. And then obviously any type of personal loans, which may not be securitized or have any asset backing them, the interest rates are higher because the bank's taking a greater risk. So what you need to understand is that when you've got cross-securitized properties, it basically means that the bank is taking an interest in all of the properties to be able to give you that lending. Now, if you do that, it does limit you in terms of the number of banks that you get to use. So how you set yourself up is you need to be understanding that if you uncrossed your properties or you have them as standalone securities, you can do different loan splits. And so if you've got one property, let's call it property A, and that property has a $300,000 loan, which is a principal loan, that means that there's $200,000 in equity if it's worth $500,000, okay? So we've got a $500,000 property. Now, at an 80% loan to value ratio, that means that you can use, of that $200,000, you can use $100,000 of that money. Now, that would then be released in a separate loan split, and that could be the deposit money to buy a new property. Now, let's go out shopping for property number 2. When we go out shopping for property number 2, we can get a loan against that property for, say, the 80%, and have that as a standalone security with a standalone loan against that property from the current lender or a new lender, a different bank, and we can use the $100,000 that we've released against property A as funds to complete that purchase. So all of a sudden, coming back in rounding that story out, we've got the purpose of the funds in terms of what their use is, their primary purpose, and then ultimately we have the security in which the bank is lending against. So when a broker tells you that it can't be done, there may be some servicing, calculating challenges that you've had, and that's how they've structured you and they've tapped you out, which could be legitimate. But in theory, if you were to uncross all of that and start again, which you can do because you can refinance to a new lender, then ultimately you would be able to then restructure those loans where you would know, one, here's what the purpose of all of those different loans looks like in terms of what they relate to. And then here's where all of those loans are secured by the collateral or the security, which is the residential property address and the title of that property. So that's answered question 1 and question 2, which lets me finish off with question 3, which was, so if you are cross-securitized and one loan is paid out on what you think is one property, I'm sorry to report that you would not be able to release your title from that lender and borrow or lend against that if your property is cross-securitized with other properties and your overall loan-to-value ratio, your global loan-to-value ratio, is above 80 or 90%, because some lenders don't like to lend beyond that. And of course, there's lenders' mortgage insurance that comes into play if you're borrowing greater than 80%. So, and that's one of the reasons why you don't cross-securitize, because if you have to do lender's mortgage insurance again, then the loan balance is far greater, which means that premium you're paying is at the top end, more than you need to pay if you actually had them as standalone. The other reason why you don't do standalone, we just saw ME Bank get raked over the coals in a PR disaster, whereby what they were doing was not allowing people to redraw money out of particular properties. So we would say if you're uncrossed, you would be in a better position to have offset accounts next to those as opposed to parking that money in the redraw. So we like the idea of keeping your property separate because it gives us flexibility and control, and they're fundamental things when you're trying to build out a property portfolio.
Hey Ben, at the top of that question, you talked about the fact that you couldn't actually draw any pictures, which is very, very helpful to help understand that. So what we might say to Danielle is if she reaches out to us, you and I went through a module, one of the lessons in our course, Start and Build.
Yep.
So we actually might give her free access to that course, so she can go straight to that module.
Sure.
And you and I spend a fair bit of time fleshing that out with diagrams. So there you go, Danielle. For the benefit of the community, hopefully that helped you as well. And for you, Danielle, reach out to us and we'll send you free access to that course, which will be great. All right, so the next question, Ben, is from Marzin. I'm up to episode 120 of the Property Couch podcast and just read chapter 1 of your book. You've turned my mindset about property upside down in a positive way. One thing I need to get my head around before moving on to chapter 2 is to try and actually work out a monetary value of my future goals so that I can put a plan together to achieve them in a time frame. I'm a bit unsure about where to start and what to consider when calculating how much money I need, e.g. questions running through my mind. I want to travel this often, and so I need this much money. I want to live close to the beach by this age, so how much would I need for this, etc. Am I overthinking it? Thanks, and looking forward to hearing from you. I think it's a really good question, Ben, and it's something that is up to chapter 1 of the book, and hopefully as it ggets through to the next few chapters, well, clearly as it gets to chapter 10, which is where we go through the case studies, you'll see that that's actually really, really important. And one of the things that we put in the book, Ben, is around the fact that, and it was also on our previous question from Danielle, where she says, I want to buy an investment property every 2 years and keep going. Without actually thinking about some of these questions in advance, you actually do confuse activity with accomplishment. It's like, well, I just got to keep buying. So one of the things that we hoped we delivered in our book and the message that we do through our planning work is to give people some clarity around you actually don't need to have 10 plus properties. In fact, a lot of the plans that we build are something between 3 and 5, and that's a real relief to a lot of people. And the fact that he's talking about, the questions, I want to travel, I want to live close to the beach, how much do I need for this? And in chapter 2, we talk about time, target, income, and expense. So all of these concepts really bring it all together to ultimately, hopefully, get you to a point where you go, here's the line in the sand that I want to actually go towards. That's where I'm going to spend all my energy and effort trying to achieve. But here's all the life stuff that's going to happen along the way. So how many do I need? What's the price, and what's the yield growth combination? I think that's really where we've been doing this for a long time, and we've built a lot of plans for a lot of people, and it's allowed us to actually go through that process of doing that work that gets people real clarity around what that looks like. So I think Ben Marzin's asking the right questions.
He is, and there are some useful tools out there. I mean, if you go to the MyGov, the Money Smart website there, you'll start to see some information in regards to how you can plan that out. You've also got Westpac Bank have a survey they release every quarter where they basically talk about what sort of income you will need to live comfortable or above comfortable lifestyles into the future. Now, our view has always been that anything above $80,000 of passive income per year is living very comfortably. You would not have too many commitments that you wouldn't be able to meet. You'd be able to have international travel on a regular basis. When you get to the $2,000 per week, which is obviously $104,000 in passive income a year, you are starting to really be in a higher percentage of people who are living very comfortably. And in terms of their travels could be extended, the class of travel that they take, the hotels that they stay in, you're starting to get up there. So I always say, as a nice little rule of thumb, if you've got a household income that is giving you the quality of life that you want for you and your partner once the kids are left the nest and once the mortgage is paid out. How much have you got left then? That's a good starting point, because that number is going to give you an idea in terms of what you can enjoy and what you can't enjoy now. And so if you want to ramp that up, then it means you need to do more investing for the future. And if you're comfortable, then that could be a target as a rule of thumb to start chasing in your first lot of models that you're building. So yeah, if you're a single person, Mazen, it's a little bit harder, but a single person, anything above $60,000 in passive income per annum, you're living comfortably. And beyond that, 80,000 and 100,000, you've got ample money and ample wealth support behind you to have a very, very enjoyable time in retirement.
Two frameworks for you, Mazen. One is to understand what your number is. Ben touched on it then, but to give you the framework, essentially your costs really go into bills and payments, living and lifestyle, investment costs, and your lending, right? So if you actually think about when you actually reach retirement, you'd like to have paid off all of your loans and you'd like to have all of your investments self-funding, right? So it really leaves bills and payments and discretionary spend. And once you know what that number is now, say, as Ben said before, $80,000 is what that is, well, then you can just apply the rule of 25. So you just go $80,000 times 25 equals 2 million. So if you had $2 million of income-producing assets right now that were unencumbered, giving you 4% per annum return, that'll be your 80%. That'll be your 80,000. Now, the challenging part is you need to then go, well, what is that? I don't have that today. I'm working towards having the equivalent of that maybe in 20 or 30 years' time, or maybe 15 years' time. There's a little bit of science that comes around using future value, which takes into account that your buying power over time diminishes because of inflation. So you need to have a little bit of science around, okay, if that's what it is in today's dollars, what will it be in 2030 when I retire, or 2042 when I retire? But ultimately, there's two frameworks. One, get a better understanding of what your number is, better understanding bills and payments and your discretionary spend, and take away the other two, which is investment costs and your lending. And two, have in essence an idea of what that actually means for you now, because it gives you a bit of a sense that, geez, if I'm nowhere near $2 million in income-producing assets, or I actually don't have any idea how I'm going to do it, well, it's very clear that you need to take some advice so that you know what steps you need to take. Because remember, money, simple behaviour is hard. So it's the process of getting to that passive income is actually primary level understanding. It's just making sure you get out of your own way and not derail it by some of your behaviours. All right, thank you for that question. We appreciate that. This one here is from Hayley Robinson. What do you think is better, paying lender's mortgage insurance or rent when getting ready to buy a first home? Ben?
Hayley, this one's I think it's relatively easy once you dumb it down in terms of some basic concepts. So the first one is this: if you are saving money quicker than property prices are going up in the area that you want to buy, then you keep saving, which will reduce your lender's mortgage insurance. But you must keep an active eye on the market because no one will know the bottom until afterwards when it's reported. So you don't want to be caught out in a situation where you're thinking, I'm waiting, and then all of a sudden all buyer demand returns, and then you're paying $10,000 or $20,000 or $30,000 more than you thought you would because you tried to time that perfectly. On the other hand, if you've got lender's mortgage insurance because property prices are moving, or you found a property that you absolutely love and want, then I would consider paying the lender's mortgage insurance and taking a medium to longer term view around that. And that's how you do it.
Yeah, and I'd also say that in a vacuum, that's right, Hayley, because that's numbers. The other part is just the emotional side of it, because you say, what do you think is better? Well, let's define better. Do you prefer to live in your own home, or are you quite comfortable renting someone else's whilst you get yourself in a position to do that? But I was going to say exactly the same as Ben. If your savings rate is at or below what the prices are moving, it makes sense for you to continue to save. Otherwise, if it's moving quickly, pay the LMI. But the other thing to do is just find out, usually for a first home buyer, the entry level is usually around that sort of anywhere between 400,000 and 600,000 level, with some variances to that. So work out what the LMI is, and then you can, instead of sort of punching at shadows, you can actually make a decision around what it is, because that number might be something that you can fathom very, very comfortably, given that it will mean that you can touch your own four walls and have that peace of mind and security that comes in living in your own home. But it really comes down to if you want to assess it from an emotional level or purely a numbers level or a combination of both. But I think it's a really good question, and thanks for sending it through. This next one, Ben, is from Aaron. I've been trying to get all our debts, credit cards sorted before getting property investment advice, and I feel like I'm just procrastinating now. So what would you say to that one, Ben?
Wow, it's a very short, sharp question, so thanks, Aaron.
It was on Facebook, by the way.
Right, that's probably why. You still got to get them sorted out. Like, we do want to get the level of credit card limits down, because that's going to impact borrowing power. But we also want to make sure, Aaron, before you go into property investing, that you are really clear about the commitment that you're making in regards to regular repayments of a mortgage. So, if your money management skills are poor, we would want to make sure that you would get into some type of routine to know that you can meet the repayments that you need to, because the last thing you'd want to do is buy a property and then in 6 or 12 months' time realise that you can't afford it, because you will lose money in stamp duty and costs, even if the property goes up a little bit. So that's the challenge there. So don't procrastinate. Jump on the My Wealth portal, Money Smarts or MakeMoneySimpleAgain.com.au. Get there, get organised, set up all your money. Then you'll know your surplus. Then we'll attack the credit card that has the highest interest, is my preference, because that'll save you the most money. And then you'll start to see the progress will feel, if you've got an extreme amount of credit card debt, then the program will feel challenging, but it's the right way to go because it's the quickest way to get rid of your debt. But you may also want to look to consolidate or roll those into one card. But the critical thing from our point of view is the limit, and making sure that you get yourself into some level of money management hygiene to allow yourself to be able to look to investments and getting property investment advice. Because if you've got really strong incomes but a bit of credit card debt, that's no problems. It does require a mortgage broker, investment savvy mortgage broker, or a property investment advisor to run those numbers for you, to give you some visibility on that, Aaron.
Good feedback, but the only thing I'd add to that is I think a little bit of a hint is in the last part of the question here, and I feel like I'm just procrastinating now, is what Aaron said, and that's what I'd like to unpack a little bit, because sometimes you can come up with excuses why you wouldn't go ahead and get some property investment advice, because it actually says, well, I won't go and get the advice because I've got these debts over here, and once I've done that, then I will. But it's actually just a disguise to the fact that I feel very fearful about what I'm doing. I don't have enough information, therefore I don't feel confident about taking a step, but I don't feel comfortable about sharing that insecurity, so I'll hide behind the fact that I've got these debts. So if the debts, as you say, Ben, are just token debts and token credit card amounts, and you've got enough income to be able to do it, it's just an excuse. And you need to get some help around understanding what it takes to move forward. You might have some beliefs around money. You might have seen your parents buy an investment property and it went pear-shaped. You might have some friends who've got very strong opinions and they're influencing you. There's all sorts of things that can come. But as Ben said, we want to make sure it's not the former, where you've got debts that are out of control and credit cards that are out of control. Because if you do have that, well, then it's probably a good reason to procrastinate, because you really do want to get on top of those. Hey, thanks for the question, Aaron. Hey, I got this one from Grant, Ben, which is just an extension of a previous question. It's also on Facebook this week. How much in today's money do you need in assets to get 2K passive income? Really simple. 2,000, let's call it 100,000 a year. Apply the rule of 25. 25 times 100,000 is $2.5 million worth of income producing assets, getting you 4%. If you think that, oops, there goes my phone. I should put that on silent. If you think that you get a higher return, I think it's 5%. It's the rule of 20, Ben. If you think it's a lower return, it's the rule that 3%. It's the rule of 33.33. So, but essentially, it's a very rough rule of thumb to give you a sense of what it takes using the rule of 25. So, 100,000 times 25 equals 2.5 million. You need $2.5 million worth of income-producing assets outside of the family home, Ben. Don't include that one that's not income-producing. Outside of the family home for you to be able to get a passive income of $2,000 a week.
And you don't want to, sell down on that capital. Like, in other words, if you want to leave a legacy for the next generation, of course, you can balance out a sell down of capital as well. You don't have to maintain that 2.5. But when you're in your accumulation phase, go hard, go early, and then pay the debt down. And then ultimately you will have a wealth base that you can then manage and control and make choices around whether you sell something down or retire the debt out and keep living off the passive income, which is our preferred method. But you'll potentially have lump sums of money that we'll then have to make decisions on whether you put it in super and so forth. So lots to be done there, but a really nice summary from Bryce in terms of rule of 25 works really well.
All right, Ben, there's some really great questions there. We want to say thanks to Sabrina. We want to say thanks to Danielle. We also want to say thanks to Marsden, Haley, Aaron, and that final one there with Grant. So thank you, folks. Hopefully that's benefited not only you who send the question in, but the community in general who may be feeling like they've got similar questions. Okay, Ben, so my life hack today is just some work from home hacks that I've been asking a few people around, employing myself, all that sort of stuff. So number one, dress for work. Ben, that gets your mindset right. I've got to say you're very good at this. You do this every day. I must admit I'm probably more relaxed around that. I prefer to just be warm and comfortable, but you actually still get dressed in your business attire, and it's really, you've talked about it being good for your mindset. So that's number one, Ben. Number two, at home, when we're working from home, it's pretty easy just to get the old dining chair out, Ben, and use it, but you need to get a suitable chair with back support because if you're going to be there, like, it's not as if you're working from home once a week. For a lot of people, they're in their 8th and 9th week in a row where they're doing it. So wherever possible, if you've got a suitable chair with back support, that's going to be helpful. And for those folks, I use a laptop, Ben, but I've plugged it into 2 monitors so that I can actually increase my eye level. So that means that I don't arch my back and strain my eyes. Number 3, leave your office out of your bedroom wherever possible, Ben. Now, some people, including some of our own team, that's not an option, where they do have to work out of their bedroom. But if it is an option, then your bedroom is a place for rest and rejuvenation. You don't want it to be a reminder of the workplace. So if you have the opportunity to keep it out of your bedroom, I'm going to suggest that that's a very, very good hack for you. Number 4, don't wake up 5 minutes before your day begins, Ben. Just because you save on 45 to 50 or an hour on commute time, you sure take some of it back for sleep. But I'm going to suggest that if you get up, you have a routine around doing some things prior to starting the workday, that's going to pay you some dividends big time. Number 5, I've said this before, it's been part of my process for a very long time now, Ben, but I disable all notifications on my phone. There is no ping, ping, ping letting me know when I've got an email, when I've got a Facebook message, when I've got a WhatsApp message, none of them. So I'm going to suggest that if you haven't done that, that might be a good place to start, because it's easier to disconnect from your workspace if you're sitting on the couch when your office is 4 meters away, to make sure there's not this never-ending sense of notifications being pinged. Number 6 is fill the silence. If you're used to being around buzz, if you're an extrovert, Ben, I'm an introvert, so I love it, but the extroverts need some interaction. So you might want to have some form of music that brings the best out in you, or even having a television on, perhaps on mute, Ben, just so that you feel that you've got some connection with someone, but make sure it's nothing too engrossing. And my 7th and final one, Ben, is create some boundaries around your knock-off time. So if you would normally knock off at this time, Freddie Flintstone blows the whistle and you're out of there, Ben, create some routine around that time as well, so that you can create some boundaries around what is switch off and rejuvenation time versus what is game time. And
most of the millennials won't know who Fred Flintstone is, but for us 70s children, we absolutely know. Mate, you missed a big opportunity here. Do you realise that? Do you want to know? Like, that was 7. You could have rolled them out over 7 weeks, right? So you could have absolutely rolled them out over 7 weeks, right? So you've just missed that big opportunity where you could have had one life hack for the home. Oh, well, that's it. See, I only use one did you know, usually one a week, right? So I don't have to stock up on did you knows. So just a thought. Just a life hack for you.
Well, I did think about how it does add the pressure each week to find something that's meaningful, but
only joking. It's great.
We want to add some value to our community, Ben, and hopefully some of those things might help folks who are still navigating as we wind back to some sense of normality, but we still will have work from home for some time. So there you go, Ben. Now, normally I say, Ben,
the music,
no.
mate. Cue the music, Bryce. We need a new music piece to come in here now for our new segment.
Well, what is the things with
What's
our
the segment
podcast
called again?
We don't necessarily have too many editing tricks in it, just to keep it simple for Ivis, who's got enough on her plate already. But you want some music to come in at this point.
Well, cue the music. What's it called? I better write it down. Was it?
Well,
this week in property news. What's making property news? Beautiful, fantastic. Well, I've got a special guest, Bryce, coming in. Our head of research, the Capital Growth King, Jeremy Shepherd, has crunched some numbers, which is quite interesting, right? Because obviously we're very interested in demand supply, because high demand, low supply means capital growth is coming. So Jeremy's put together a little COVID property risk by regions piece. So
yeah, I'm excited. All right, Jeremy, welcome back to the Property Couch. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks for having me back.
So, mate, you've been busy.
You've been busy in the lab, and I think this is data that I think our audience will love to hear. So, can you give us a bit of a backstory on before we dive in? What made you sort of look under the bonnet on this, and how did you come up with what you came up with around COVID-caused risky regions?
Yeah, well, the ABS released some data. They'd conducted a survey to find out where people were most affected by the impact of the pandemic, and there were two standout industries that have been mostly affected by the COVID. The obvious ones, of course, are accommodation and food services, and arts and recreation services. So what I did was had a look at which regions have the highest concentration of these sort of workers, the assumption being that these would be regions most affected by the impact of COVID. But I did some other rummaging around as well, and I've just had a look at how metrics related to supply and demand are tracking from March to April, and picked out some of these metrics and some of these locations. And there's also rather unique situation we're entering with these low interest rates, where we're getting a very high percentage of property markets that are cash flow positive compared to the historical averages.
All right.
So, yeah, do you want me to dive into some of these risky regions?
Yeah.
Lead off.
Yeah, go on. Tell us the worst regions. You've got 5 worst regions. What are they?
Yeah, so we've got the Sunshine Coast, where around about 15% of workers are in one of those two most affected industries. There could be other industries affected, but I just looked at those two. So 15% doesn't sound like much, when you're talking about 100% of employees. But it was Sunshine Coast, Sydney's inner west, the Gold Coast, Brisbane inner city, and the Southern Highlands and Shoalhaven in New South Wales, which is a bit of a surprise. I've got a bigger list of about 10, but I won't take you through all of them. We'll be here all day. The stickers told me that this will be made available for download on Facebook or the website.
Show notes.
That's the term all the kids are using. Show notes. Yeah. Now the other side of the spectrum is the best regions. So you've got Toowoomba, where there's only about 2% of the working force that's either full-time or part-time in one of these sort of industries, and Queensland Outback, Riverina, Sydney, Baulkham Hills and Hawkesbury, and in Western Australia's Wheatbelt. So those are the...
So not too many. It's probably what we're saying.
That's right, yeah.
We've got to qualify these SA4 areas. So for anyone who's interested in... Yep.
So an SA4 is a region that the Australian Bureau of Statistics bundle other sub-regions into, trying to have a consistent sort of population size. So these are the biggest, the SA4. And SA4 consists of a set of SA3s, which are probably closest to what you'd call a local government area. Mm-hmm. And then you get down to SA2s, which is like a suburb, and SA1s, which is a few blocks.
Within a suburb. Yep, very good.
Suburb.
Now,
That's just put it in perspective.
So there you go. So in real terms, obviously, these areas are farming areas predominantly, or outback areas. So there's not too much accommodation and food services or personal trainers floating around those areas. They get enough. They get enough time out in the farm. In terms of,
sorry. Oh, I was just going to say, I also came up with a couple of other lists where I looked at potential for vacancy rates to rise in these areas. So let's say you've got one of these areas where you've got a high concentration of these sort of workers, and there's also a high proportion of renters in these areas. So if they've lost their job, then you could expect that they're going to vacate, and there could be that. This is assuming the government can't provide sufficient, stimulus to keep them in their rental accommodation. They may have to leave. So the top 5 areas where there's
no surprises here, none at all.
You've got Northern Territory, outback.
Yep.
I mean, that's just a very high renter proportion area anyway.
Yep.
Sydney, city and inner south.
There's the CBD of Sydney. Yep.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Brisbane inner city, Melbourne inner, and the Sydney eastern suburbs.
Mm-hmm. So that's what's showing up in all the data as well in terms of the increased vacancy rates that we're also seeing in those particular areas. So they were the areas that we warned you about. Yep.
It's a reminder that CBD stands for could be dangerous, Ben.
Yes, a nice one, Bryce. Could be dangerous for property. Very good.
Yeah, and actually on that topic of vacancy rates, I was just looking at how the national sort of average vacancy rate had changed from March to April. There's been a sudden increase. According to my calculations, it's an increase of 23%. Now, from month to month, you quite often see 5, 10, sometimes even 15%. So it did have to shift significantly to show that there is something happening. And 23% is a significant increase. Yep. So it's definitely had an impact on vacancy rates.
Yeah, so we said that was always going to be the challenge. And so these markets within markets, you're going to have to really look at, because there is going to be an oversupply of rental accommodation and pressure on rents in our big CBD areas. That's for sure, until we get some normality of our rental and food services and arts and recreational services, people returning to work. So be careful. And if you've got properties in those areas, unfortunately, they are the areas that could see the distressed selling going on. Now, in terms of risk areas in the regions, lifting our eyes and seeing out wide, what have we got there, Jess?
Okay, so when you look at the other side of the spectrum, where you don't have a high proportion of renters, but instead it's owner-occupiers, if they have lost their jobs, then their only option is probably to sell, assuming that the government can't support them. So some of those regions include Ballarat, Southern Highlands and Shoalhaven, Hume, Latrobe, Gippsland and Warrnambool and Southwest. In fact, the top 10, 80% of them were in Victoria. So on the assumption that they can't get this, the JobKeeper is insufficient, then you might see more stock come on market. But of course, this is just looking at regions that are affected by the COVID. There are a load of other variables, and some of these regions may be actually quite hot, and the impact might be fairly minimal. So it's just purely looking at those areas that are going to be potentially impacted more than others by COVID.
Cool. Now, in your report, you talk about the DSR ratio in terms of the metrics and the movements, and you've got reports from December right through to the April results that you've got. Now, we won't be able to go through all of them, but what did catch your eye? Because you'll be able to, again, this report is going to be made free. It's a select residential property report authored by Jeremy, so we'll make sure it's available. Any interesting observations in the data between March and April?
Yeah, well, I mean, as I mentioned before, there was the sharp increase in vacancy rates. But the thing that surprised me the most is that the overall national demand to supply ratio was the same for April as it was for March. So the market has pretty well responded to this pandemic by reducing supply in match with demand. So that actually surprised me. I thought there would definitely be a lot more metrics that we'd see deteriorating, but instead it's actually been quite constant. And I would still expect some of this data to flow through in coming months, because some of the metrics we average over a little more than a month, but you would have expected to see, if it was a disastrous circumstance, a more significant sudden change, and that hasn't been the case. So I've been surprised. I mean, obviously I'm biased towards the Australian property market as a great investment, but even I have underestimated the resilience of the market, and I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the year we're actually seeing prices higher than they are now.
Okay, you heard it first here. The Capital Growth King is calling the market. He's saying there'll be some price growth by the end of the year. I'm not far behind you, Jez. I've always said I've been quietly confident about where the market's going to head. But let's finish off.
I just want to say, Jeremy doesn't throw those things out lightly, Ben. He's very much a pragmatist. He's very much a data-driven guy.
He is.
Show me the evidence.
Can I just cover my rear end there and
qualify
suggest
that? Yeah, sure.
I also wouldn't be surprised if prices drop by 5%, but something like 10 and above, I think that's a little bit extreme.
Prices have already dropped, Jeremy. I mean, we've seen it in our own buyers agency team. They've been able to pick up properties for 10% less than what they were able to buy pre-COVID. So in certain opportunities, there has already been that drop, but I see it as very temporary. So
interestingly enough, I mean, as you saw in the core logic data, right, and we're talking about the Australian market, it's gone up 0.3. So it actually hasn't dropped. So you can cherry pick it. The stuff we've been talking about, and our biggest challenge has always been finding good stock. And when we're finding good stock, it's under competition in a lot of cases. So it is.
But that's the point. That's the point. Finding that good stock during that time when anxiety was at its peak, there was a dip, so we did pick it up. But now, going forward, if you have to have a headline statement, you have to say property will drop. But that's $7 trillion worth of property statement right there. But in the little segments that we play in, we're seeing in our own observations, Jeremy, we are seeing demand exceeding supply without a shadow of a doubt.
Okay, so let's move on to the cash flow positive story. I think there's a couple of headlines here to jump into as part of our new segment. This observation in the chart is fascinating, right? In terms of, again, download the report, jump online, get the report, but just take us through the observations there.
Yeah, so there are roughly 7 times more cash flow positive markets around the country than there have been long term. So about 10 times as many as there were 10 years ago. And that's because of, obviously, these interest rate declines. Now, there has been a little bit of a dip in prices as well over the last few years, slight increase in rent, but it's really this interest rate drop that has put us in a very unique circumstance where in the past, to find a cash flow positive market with the current interest rates as they were back in the day, you had about a 1 in 1,000 chance looking at property markets in our, say, top 20 significant urban areas. But now it's dropped from about 1 in 1,000 to 1 in 30. So there are, comparatively speaking, a very large number of property markets where it's quite easy to pick up an investment property that is cash flow positive. And that is a unique area in Australia's history. I don't think we've ever seen a circumstance like that. And these sorts of circumstances don't last very long because it doesn't really make sense if you're paying less on a mortgage than you would be paying, for example, in rent.
Mate, love the work. I will watch that closely because, as I said, we've obviously got a little bit of pressure on rents, which we've been talking about. So that might see that number peak even a little bit higher in the coming month or two. But I think you're right. I don't think that will be, long-lived. I think we'll see some significant changes back to where we were. So, mate, thank you very, very much for coming on. So that report is called COVID Property Risk by Regions. It's available through, obviously, Select Residential Property. and we've got that link in the show notes, so we'll be able to get that out to people who is interested in that report. So
I reckon everyone should get that, Ben. I reckon everyone should get their hands on that. There's some epic little graphs there, and that one around the show that the interest rate correlation to the increase in the percentage of suburbs cash flow positive. You've got to see that. So yeah, check out the show notes and get access to that. Hey mate, thanks for coming out of the lab and joining us on Ben's new segment that he seems to keep outsourcing to other people, but at least he's outsourcing it to quality.
Well,
thanks for having me on the show, guys.
I'm sure there'll be a time I'll have Tim on soon. I've got my little segment now,
Yeah,
so
good.
People have been asking, can you bring all these economists and everyone on? Well, now I'm going to have this little time slot that might be available.
Mate.
Yep. The other, it's a good segue.
Oh, you're still going.
Well,
yes,
of course,
okay.
I'm not done. I've got a few things to talk about here. So, auction clearance rates are also surprised in terms of what Jeremy was just talking about there in terms of this underlying demand that we're seeing in the property market. So we saw, and these are the final numbers, right, guys, here for week ending 10 May, Sydney had a clearance rate of 66.3%.
Yep.
So it sold 216 auctions at a 66%.
So just excited to be back amongst the action.
Very good. Now, Melbourne, obviously, remember, had a closed shop. And, our mate Daniel Andrews,
Dr. Dan, yes.
Yeah, who's made a few wrong calls economically in the last couple of weeks, but we won't go there. Is definitely, we've got auctions opening for the first time here in Melbourne with 10 people. Go figure. A public auction out on the street, I'm sure we could get more than 10 people social distancing 1.5 metres apart, but 10 is better than none, so we'll take what we can get from Dan. He's
like a lottery. Who can attend? You have to put your finger in the ball. You don't register in Victoria for auctions, so it's like
it's ridiculous because
the agent's probably part of it, saying, well, at least we get to know who our registered bidders are, because if you're not registered to bid, you can't turn up. You're one of the 10.
Well, imagine the qualification that you'd have to go through from the agent if you've got more than 10 active buyers. You actually aren't officially allowed to be here. Get on your mobile phone and go up the road, and here's the selling agent that I'm going to give your phone to, and you can bid through her.
By the way, what's your reserve price again? Because if your reserve price is higher than Johnny down the road, I might give you a live ticket rather than a mobile ticket.
Well, unbelievable. But, I mean, surely that could have been solved with a large speaker and microphone and having people spread out on a street. Because that's what Melbourne's famous for our auctions. It's the auction capital of the world. But, obviously there are smarter minds than me. I just don't know whether Daniel Andrews is talking to them. In terms of Brisbane, not a big market.
Political, Jess.
23 auctions, so really irrelevant, but had a clearance rate of 47%. Adelaide, 29 auctions last weekend, had a clearance rate of 51%. The other interesting bit of news, and this is why I love this segment, it's only week one in, but it's already my favourite segment.
I love it already. Okay.
Is one of the things that is a leading indicator, and I always talk about leading indicators because that's what I'm interested in, is CoreLogic owns a lot of data and valuation services. So they've got a very, very strong indicator in terms of real estate agents who are doing what we call CMA reports. Now, a CMA report is basically a computerized marketing assessment report on property. You can do it property per property, gives you valuation, and it helps the agents with their listings. Now, you can see on this graph, they do a 7-day rolling average. It just collapsed through March. The property market obviously went into hibernation right up to the end of the Easter weekend. And now it's coming strongly out of that particular period. So we did see, their research analyst, Eliza, I think it is there, who's basically come out and said, here's what's going on. We are definitely seeing the property market becoming awake. Now, what does that mean? It effectively
You see it every year, Ben. You see it every year. It goes to sleep in January and it fires up in February every year.
Correct. Well, but this is markedly off in terms of what happened through the COVID lockdown. And we're now starting to see, so expect listings to start to increase over the coming weeks and months. And obviously now that the Victorian market is open. So yes, hopefully we'll see a little bit more stock. And in talking to a lot of agents and industry professionals that as I do each week, there is a feeling that maybe the spring selling market will move a little bit earlier. That might move into, say, July, August, as opposed to that traditional September period where we get all of those auctions. So people are now starting to be a little bit more confident of that, which leads me into the
still going.
Still going, Bryce. This is the property news in full. Consumer sentiment, unbelievable numbers that just came out from Westpac and the Melbourne Institute. We saw a sentiment rebound of 16.4% to 88.1 in May from its extremely weak. So remember, the April number was the worst ever on record for the 50 years that this survey's been run. And the May number has been the biggest turnaround ever since the survey's been run.
Imagine that.
That's not a V-shaped recovery, but that is just basically saying, now, we remember a measurement of 100 is more optimism than pessimism. So we're still pessimistic at 88.1, but certainly an incredibly strong rebound in confidence, as we've seen in terms of how well we've managed through the COVID-19 lockdown and where we've got the numbers. Now, this is the extraordinary piece that I want to focus in on. One of the sub-questions that gets asked during this, and I've mentioned it before in my monthly data wrap-up, a time to buy a dwelling index. Time to buy a dwelling index jumped 31.8. Now, it fell in April 26.6. And check this reading out. The reading currently sits at 108.2. So it's back in positive territory, meaning that there are more optimists than outnumber the pessimists. And this is what we've been saying around the property market. It has surprised some in regards to its resilience, but this survey indicates that we absolutely have people who are quietly optimistic and potentially looking to buy. Now, it does go on to say that the consumer expectations around property prices, which is led by obviously the noise we're hearing in the media, had an increase of 4.6. So it's basically still had a significant drop. So they're not expecting property prices to go up, but they're basically saying great time to buy because low competition, which is what we've been saying. So that is an interesting read. Now, the only one who's bucking the trend is Victoria. We seem to be a little bit more pessimistic, and our actions, led by, the government here, is also probably playing into that space in terms of not being able to open the cafes and restaurants, which, from feedback that we're hearing on the ground, is also something that the coffee shop owners would have preferred to have the right to do rather than the government of the day making that decision in terms of looking after their viability. People want to get back to work. That's exciting. The marketplace will see that. And then, but the main one we want to talk about now is the unemployment result. In breaking news, the unemployment rate data just in has seen the unemployment rate seasonally adjusted move from 5.2% in March to 6.2% in April. Now, what's interesting about that, most economists predicted that it would be an 8% unemployment rate at this point, because everyone's predicting that we're going to 10, including Treasury and the RBA. So, but a little bit under now. So what's the reason for that? Well, seasonally adjusted, we saw employment fall by 594,300 people. So not a terrific number there. But the other interesting number was the participation rate. Now, I expected the participation rate to actually increase. Even though it's at historically high levels, I actually believed that participation rate, but it didn't. What actually happened is it's fallen from its previous peaks by 2.4% to now be down at 63.5%. Now, what that correlates to in terms of people, that's 489,800 people that have left the workforce or haven't been able to work due to, being in quarantine or just had their hours or just left the workforce. So it's really interesting in terms of that number. So that's not a pretty number, but at a 6.2 compared to the 8%, that probably marries that up a little bit in terms of that. Now, the one that we really want to focus in on, and the one that all the smart money is on, is total hours worked. because that's really going to show whether we're seeing productivity decline. And as expected, from March to April, under full lockdown in April, we saw hours worked fall by 9.2% between March and April. And so that is obviously a significant number there as well. So the data is not terrific at the moment. We're obviously going to have people who are underemployed, and also these people who will be seeking employment during this period. So obviously it's been the biggest release of data in the unemployment rate history in my living lifetime. So now we wait and see in terms of, as we see the May number and then also the June number, because if the lockdowns have only been released now, remember they are taken around the 12th of the month. So we're easing restrictions now. So I suspect our May number will also be pretty ordinary. And then the June number, we're going to see potentially what sort of life has been created in the economy after the lockdown. And then finally July, where we hope to be post-COVID restrictions and relatively open. Again, expect cases to increase and expect there to be some negative and concern around that and sentiment issues around that. But overall, not as bad as we expected the number to be, but time will tell in terms of what happens over the course of the next couple of months.
All right, good update, good intel, as you said, hot off the press, so it's good information for people to digest. All right, there you go, folks. Hopefully that's been a great episode for you. There's thank you to all of those folks who contributed the questions. We certainly appreciate that. We encourage that, whether it's Facebook, whether it's on our homepage at thepropertycouch.com.au. For those folks who said that we'll give you a copy of our upcoming course launch, you can get early access to that. Please reach out to us and we'll certainly let you have those details. We want to thank everyone for contribution. Thanks again to Jeremy for coming out of the Capital Growth Lab to chat to us. Thanks to you as always, Ben, and until next week.
Knowledge is empowering, Bryce, but only if you act on it.
Well said. See you next week, folks.
Hey there folks, Bryce Holdaway here. Before you go, if you're new to our community and only listened to maybe a handful of episodes, I thoroughly recommend that you go all the way back to episode number 1, where we unpack all of the foundations when it comes to property investing. Now, for those of you that might be a little bit time poor, I've got good news for you. We have a binge guide that you can download straight away, which summarizes the first 20 episodes where Ben and I unpack the foundational pillars of the A, B, C, D, and so much more. And you can get that straight away. If you go to thepropertycouch.com.au/TPC20, you can download it and consume it whenever you want. It's completely free and available now. And for those of you, just a quick reminder that nothing we've spoken about today constitutes financial advice. We recommend that you reach out to your licensed professional advisor so that you can look at your unique circumstances before acting on any information. Now don't forget, go to thepropertycouch.com.au/TPC20 and get your binge guide today.